Hey, how you doing? It's episode 36 of the infinite Notcast, where it appears I will be talking about absolutely every single record I have ever owned in exhaustive, nay, tedious detail. Today, episode 36, it's the 28th of December 2020. It is a bank holiday, and that means that it is time to talk about Suede's second album, Dog Man Star. There is no reason why I've spoken about this today, apart from the fact that I went onto Twitter yesterday and I asked, what shall I talk about? And I had Dog Man Star, I had the Joy Division early years, I think I had a ranking of the Pet Shop Boys albums, and David Fincher's films, and the overwhelming majority of people, 44%, which is the largest minority, in fact, said they wanted to hear me talk about Suede's Dog Man Star, released in October, I think the 10th of October 1994. Really doesn't seem like over 26 years ago that I first purchased this album from the HMV in Brighton, of all places. Left work slightly early in order to get to HMV just before it closed at 6 p.m. and bought the compact disc and put it onto my little portable CD player in the bedsit in which I lived, from which I could see the sea. There was something very, very strange about that period of time in my life. So October 1994, I just graduated from university, where I went to Leicester, or if you pronounce it phonetically, Leicester. Graduated from the De Montfort University, also known as a Polytechnic, with a 2-2 in English and mass media, which is a very nice way of saying that I spent 3 years at university not quite knowing what I wanted to do for a living, but I thought I'd do something that would interest me. And I don't want to sound like old Father Time talking about how weird and different everything was back in 1994. But in 1994, you could smoke at your desk. You could probably drink at your desk if you were a senior member of staff, especially in the afternoon. I thought being a grown-up was going to be easy. They lied to me. Don't grow up. It's a trap. And here we are. And so this album I have had in my life for longer than I haven't at this point, which is a bizarre way of thinking. I've known this record for over half of my life. And it's a very good album, as I'm sure you know, because if you didn't know that, you wouldn't be watching this, and you'd be like, why am I listening to some geezer talk about some record I've never heard of that I've got no opinion about? Well, I don't know, but here we are, and here I am talking about Suede's Dog Man Star. So, came out October the 10th, 1994. Now, according to Phil Savage, that was the best album of the decade that had been released so far. Not quite true, because if it had come out 2 months earlier, it would have come out before the Holy Bible, and therefore it would have been the best album of the 90s up to that point. But sadly, when the Manics released the Holy Bible, which I think was on August the 29th, 30th of 1994, I remember that was a bank holiday, so I had to go to the Hour Price in the town centre. I rang them up to make sure that they were open and bought the album. Bought the picture disc CD, actually, on the bank holiday, and then that became the best album of that decade so far. There are other albums that I love more and have been more important to me, but I think the Holy Bible is probably the best album of the decade, and if that hadn't been made, this would be the best album of the decade, although probably being the second best album of the decade is a very, very high accolade to have. And in fact, I love them both equally. They're both brilliant in many, many ways. So I'm going to talk about this album. I'm going to talk about the circumstances surrounding it, what happened with it, some of the records that came out at the same time. And as per my earlier discussions, I won't be interspersing bits of video or playing bits of audio so that I don't fall foul of any copyright Nazis. So, first and foremost, I have to take a mild bit of a rewind back to around about November 1993, as detailed in this book by Brett Anderson, Afternoon with the Blinds Drawn, and also this book here, Suede, the biography by David Barnett, both of which I have sneakily been reading to remember anecdotes and general tit-tats before we come up to it. So Suede were in the midst of touring the debut album in America in late 1993. And they two misfortunes befell them on that tour. Three, actually. The first one is that some jazz nobody who was also releasing records under the name of Suede in America and selling a grand total of less than 3,000 albums during her career, decided to take the band to court, and rather than accept a cash settlement and allowing Suede to continue with the name, she doggedly insisted that she should be able to continue to record and perform under the name Suede in America only. This move, which to me, to be honest, is bafflingly arrogant, actually, considering that she thought she might have had a career when she was, frankly, didn't. Resulted in the band changing their name in America, so every time that they played America from that point on, they were called the London Suede. And the phrase the London Suede doesn't sound so good. Now, if you quickly look at the covers of the Suede single Stay Together and the London Suede single Stay Together, London Suede just feels like a bit of a compromise. To be honest, that person's decision and their arrogance around that, when they had been offered a chunk of money to effectively go away and accept that their career probably wasn't going to go anywhere, which it still hasn't, by the way, damaged the band and made the band less likely and less willing to want to play America. The second thing which happened was that they were on a double headline tour with the Cranberries, and the Cranberries had just released, I think, the single of Linger, I think it was, and it was absolutely huge, and people were coming to see the Cranberries and then going home before Suede came on, or vice versa. So the benefits of that weren't really happening for the band. And I think the third thing is that Bernard's father died during that tour, and I don't know, I can't recall how old Bernard was then, probably 22, 23, maybe 24, and that will become relevant later on, but certainly when you're at that age and a parent dies, it really changes your perspective on the world, and it makes you, I think, perhaps more emotional than you normally would be, because you're processing and dealing with grief, and at the same point you have to continue to function and continue to go to work, and in Suede's case, you have to go and play shows, and the other members of the band who aren't dealing with grief are probably entertaining themselves in a variety of legal and possibly semi-legal ways after the show, which meant that there were definitely two factions in the band at that point. One of which was Bernard, who was processing his personal loss and his experience of what was happening, alongside the other members of the band that were experiencing something very different, the first flushes of success in America. And it meant that the two sides of the band had very different experiences. They were still touring, played some European shows, started introducing some new songs into the set, and the first of the new songs which they introduced into the set, the first release after the album was this single, which is Stay Together, legendary in Suede circles or Suede fans for two reasons. One, the band hardly ever play it live. Secondly, it bloody bonkers. So Stay Together, this is the American 6-track CD. This is the standard UK and European 4-track CD. Is probably one of the best EPs that there ever was. And there's a phrase that I read about the Jesus and Mary chain, which is also true about Suede, actually, which is that they didn't write B-sides, they just wrote songs. And so, songs like The Living Dead, which is on the B-side here. The Living Dead is a song that on any other band's album would be enormous and seen as a real centre point of the album. Here it was the B-side of a single that wasn't even on the album. My Dark Star, which the band played live a lot of times. Again, absolutely great track. Easily deserves to have been on an album. Stay Together itself is perhaps slightly more divisive. It's a long, sprawling epic where you've effectively got 4 parts of the song, but then at the end, you've got what appears to be the band careening out of control and exploring sonic textures in a way which very few other bands were really doing at that point. Oh, pardon me. I did say I was cutting down on caffeine, and it appears to be working. Also, when I'm not at work, I don't have to have caffeine in order to stay awake to answer all the emails. So Stay Together is a great EP. You know, it's 16 minutes of music, 3 songs, one of the best, most audacious, ballsy, weird A-sides that ever hit the pop charts. You know, it's 8.5 minutes long on the 12-inch. It goes to places that people like Queen would never have even thought of going. It's a standard song, and then all of a sudden it careens off into this guitar crescendo that, having seen it performed live, is staggeringly powerful. And there's The Living Dead, which is, again, one of the best B-sides ever made. And My Dark Star, again, one of the best B-sides ever made. And at the same time, the band were touring. And here is a bootleg CD of Performance, which is a radio broadcast from, I think, the Blackpool Tower Ballroom on, I think, about the 11th of February 1994. It's one of the last shows that Bernard played in the band. It's also a really brilliant live recording that I wish would get a proper release on a Suede at the BBC box set. The full show was recorded. All but 3 of the songs, I think, were broadcast on the radio, and that exists. Also, by the way, if you're a new guitarist and you're joining Suede and you want to work out how to play the new songs, it's really good to listen to this bootleg to understand how the previous guitarist was able to wrench out the sounds using one guitar. So it gives you an idea of which parts to play. So there's a number of early versions of songs that appeared on Dog Man Star that are on this. So there is Trashy, which became, I think, This Hollywood Life. There's We Are the Pigs. There is Heroin, and there's Losing Myself, which later turned into New Generation alongside Stay Together. It's a brilliant recording if you can track it down, and if you can track it down, do get it. It's one of the definitive Suede live documents. And following that, the band went into the studio, and they went in to record what became Dog Man Star. The stories around how this album was recorded and why people left the band aren't really my stories to tell. Bernard left the band during the recording of this album, and there is at least one song on the album, The Power, on which he does not play. But he wrote and demoed every track that was on there. I think there was a clear conflict of opinion about the sound that the band were having and some of the creative decisions that were being made at that point. I think Bernard said to the band that he wanted to fire the band's producer, Ed Bueller, and the band decided that actually, if it was going to be Ed that was going to go, then who was next? And effectively, they didn't sack him, and he wasn't fired. I think it was one of those moments where you realise that the two people, or the two paths, are going to diverge. Like the end of any relationship. Even with the best will in the world, and even if you really, really love it and you want it to work, sometimes it isn't going to work. No matter how hard you try, no matter how much you want it to work. It's very, very clear that everybody in the band loved the band and wanted the band to be a success. But in order for that band to be a success, the relationship between Bernard and the rest of the group had to come to a close. And it's a difficult time for them because effectively, Suede became almost a ghost band. Imagine, for example, if Johnny Marr had left the Smiths during the recording of Meet His Murder and they'd got another guitarist in and carried on. Those are big shoes to fill. And very few bands are able to pick up the departure of a main songwriter. I think Pink Floyd did it with when Syd Barrett left. Depeche Mode did it in 1981 when Vince Clarke left. But it's very rare, and it happens about once every 13, 14 years. Syd Barrett left Pink Floyd in 1968. 13 years later, it was 1981, and Vince Clarke left Depeche Mode. 13 years after that, 1994, and Bernard leaves the band. I'm not sad because, by the way, I don't know which major songwriter or somebody left a band in 2007 and or maybe not even in 2020. So my theory might be complete hogwash and absolute bullshit. I don't know. I'm making this up as I go along. But here we go. Suede's Dog Man Star. Now, Dog Man Star was not the first thing that anybody heard. The first thing that anybody heard in terms of an actual physical commercial release was We Are the Pigs. Here is the numbered gatefold 7-inch single with this less than pleasant picture on the inside. Now, We Are the Pigs is following the the tradition that some other bands have had, which is that you don't put your most immediately commercially successful obvious single as the first track. It set the mood for the album. It's a dark, pacey number. It's been played live at lots and lots of shows. It's always a barnstormer when it's played live. And should point out, by the way, that there's a middle eight, or a bridge in We Are the Pigs that was originally written, that's only existing on live recordings but was rewritten. So when you heard We Are the Pigs on the record, there's a section which you've never heard before, even if you've been listening to all the bootleg tapes all the way through, and you're completely within your rights to go, what the dickens is that? Well, this is again a fantastic EP. It's backed with Killing of a Flash Boy and Whipsnade. Killing of a Flash Boy soon became a staple of the band's live shows. It's just a great song, ideally following up We Are the Pigs. It's sultry, it's dirty, it's naughty, it's got a kind of sleazy, glammy edge to it. It's just a fantastic song, and again, I'd love to have seen it on the album, but the album was already 58 minutes long, so that's pretty hefty by any standards. Here's the 12-inch, and again, on the back of that, we have this picture. Not exactly the most commercial of front covers for your lead-off single. And then you've got We Are the Pigs, Killing with a Flash Boy, and Whipsnade. Whipsnade is a brilliant song, again, but it wasn't performed by the band live until 2014, which I will touch upon in a future episode when we get to that part of the band's discography. Swiftly following up from that, the band started, auditioning and looking for a new guitar player, and they found a guitar player called Richard Oakes from Paul, who is younger than me, and Richard is an incredible guitarist. The only reason people don't give him the respect that he deserves and has earned and has demonstrated over and over and over again is because his name isn't Bernard Butler. In the same way that Alan White in Morrissey's band never gets the respect he deserves because he isn't Johnny Marr. In the same way that David Gilmour didn't get that much respect in the early years of Pink Floyd because he wasn't Sid Barrett. He was the new guy, and because he was the new guy, people had nostalgia about the old lineup. They don't want things to change. I completely understand that, because if you're into a band, you're into the four people that are in the band. That's the band. And when somebody leaves or somebody changes, it's changed. It's a new relationship. You've got to, as an audience member, you have to build a new relationship with the new person who's in the group, although they probably don't have a clue about that. So, when Richard joined the group, I was like, well, okay, so Bernard's gone. Bernard was fantastic. That's one hell of an order to fill. And Richard filled those shoes amply and easily. And make no mistake about it, Richard is the best guitarist, and he's as good as Bernard, better in many, many ways, which will probably get me punched in the street for saying that. And he's been the perfect foil for the rest of the band, and he's the unsung genius alongside Neil Codling in the current lineup of Suede. Brett, Matt and Simon get plenty of respect because they've been there since day one, but Richard and Neil are fantastic musicians, and Suede, even Brett himself says in his in Afternoons with the Blinds Drawn, is that Suede probably wouldn't exist without Neil, and maybe not without Richard. And so Richard joined the group, inheriting this album as a 17-year-old, and it's very easy to play these songs. It's very hard to play these songs very well. They're difficult songs, they're complex, they're long, they're involved, and I think if you listen to the first Suede album, for example, it is a selection of songs that stacks up very, very well as an album, but the first album doesn't really break the format. It's verse, chorus, middle eight, break, guitar, chorus, repeat, fade, head. This just went, I don't give a damn about structure, I'm going to do whatever I like. It's got introducing the band, which couldn't be performed live because it was so bloody difficult, and the band first played it live, I think, in 2003. It's got, songs like Daddy's Speeding, which is effectively a guitar and a piano and a bunch of feedback, and a lyric about James Dean dying in a car crash. These are abstract, big lyrical concepts welded to songs that eschew the conventions of your standard song structure. They go for weird and unusual time signatures. They go into strange places that you wouldn't have predicted. New Generation has about 4 choruses in it, by the way. Most bands would be happy with just one chorus and they'd package up. But no, New Generation hits you with a chorus, hits you with another chorus, it hits you with another chorus. So it goes, and there's that phenomenal lyric in this, which is about give me the power and I'll make them believe. It's as a 22-year-old or a 21-year-old, that was like, I was young, I was ambitious, I wanted to change the world, and I've changed the world in my own way, and it's perhaps a small way, but it's a way in which other people may not ever see or may not even notice that I've changed the world. But I know I have. Every time I go into a hospital, I know I have. Because I worked on a project where we introduced hospital mapping technology so that when you walked into a hospital, it would show you the map and it would go, you need to go here, rather than letting people just walk through a hospital and get lost. Now that was 13, 14 years ago. And as far as I know, that technology is still in use today. So I've changed the world in ways in which people probably wouldn't notice. But as a young and ambitious person, I very much believed with and agreed with the lyric that was in The Power, which is just give me the power and I'll make them bleed. And although sometimes he sings it as and I'll make them believe, which is to me really important, is give me the power and I'll make people believe. I'll show them who I am. And I think we've all felt like that. For Suede, perhaps this was the last spin of the dice, really. Perhaps it was most bands don't get to make a third album if they get to make a second one. So making a second one, you kind of throw everything at it around this. And New Generation has dozens of choruses that are sitting in it. So when he sings, and like all the boys in all the cities, I take the poison, I take the pity. That's a chorus. Then you follow it up with, oh, and she is calling here in my head, can you hear her calling? That's a chorus as well. And then you go into and I'm losing myself, I'm losing myself again. That's another. There's 3 choruses in that song. Some songs don't have one chorus in it, but it's not polite for me to mention which ones they are. So it was a ballsy album, and Richard slotted into the band and started playing it live. Now, just before Dog Man Star came out, there was this, which was a flexi-disc 7-inch single with excerpts from Dog Man Star, alongside a little kind of interstitial moment by Bernard. This, I think, was on the NME on one particular week. NME, October 8th, 1994. Not that you can necessarily see that. So the week before the album came out. And for my sins, I was away from home. My parents were on holiday and they took me with them. Probably our last foreign holiday altogether. So I had to get a friend to buy a copy of this for me before I came back. And following on from the Dog Man Star album, here's the regular 1994 CD. There's the band entered into touring, and that was a pretty bonkers experience. Now, I saw the band 3 times on the Dog Man Star tour. I saw them in Brighton, at the Brighton Dome, around the 7th of November. I saw them at the Leicester de Montfort Hall on the 31st of January 1995, and I saw them at the Blackpool Empress Ballroom, which was around about the 18th of May 1995. 3 very different shows for very different reasons. The first one at Brighton, I think it was Richard's 7th or 8th show, and he stood stock still and he was concentrating. And I was listening to that guy playing and going, my God, he's brilliant. He's a great guitarist. And he can do things with the guitar. Very few people can play guitar that well. And I think that he just shined that night, even though he didn't move, because he was concentrating on playing the songs live. It was clearly nerve-wracking for him. And I think Brett was, as a result, was being an uber front man. He was walking out into the crowd. He was really pushing and projecting in a way in which he hadn't done previously, to almost compensate for the lack of movement from Richard. Not that it was a lack, by the way, because Richard was filling the room with his sound and guitars. And there was some really powerful show. This is a DVD of the tour, which was recorded in Glasgow and Amsterdam and Bradford, Aberdeen, Middlesbrough and Paris. Now, I've been to all the venues that were filmed for this particular tour, although I didn't go and see the shows, any of the shows on this tour that were filmed for this in December 1994, because it didn't come anywhere near where I was. So I recognise all the venues. It's pretty weird to watch a DVD and go, that's Aberdeen. Yeah, that's Aberdeen's Balcony. That's the Barrowlands there, best venue in the world, currently in existence now that they've demolished the Astoria and they've closed the Leamington Spa Hall. And it's a fabulous hour of live performance, but it's also got on it tour films, which were recorded in London and in Kent. And if you haven't seen these tour films, you really, really should. They were filmed by Derek Jarman's crew, following, in London and Kent, and they were projected on the back, and they really kind of set those songs in a completely different light. I mean, I remember the first time that I saw the film for the two of us, which was in Brighton. And so the band are performing, the two of us in front of us. Richard is on piano. And then the film appears, and if you haven't seen the film, it's two static shots of two twins, one male, one female, responding to a series of events. And it's almost like you're watching both sides of a relationship collapse. Clearly, that's the brief that they were given. And it could have been the two of us. And it's a powerful song. And there is no song that's quite like it, I think. It's one of Suede's underrated masterpieces. The two of us, and like a great many Suede songs, such as Beautiful Ones and Positivity, it pinches its title from Prince, which is not that well advertised. This DVD is well worth getting. It's probably on YouTube, actually. But there you are. Here's I think a 10x7 of the lineup of the band. Look at them all, so young there, so ambitious. In the tour programme here, by the way, lots of hyperbole, which tells you that, for example, that Suede are the best band in the world, I think. And what matters is not that you know it, but that they know it. Now, far be it from me to puncture any aspirations around that. They were very, very, very good. Maybe not the best band in the entire world, but there's an awful lot of bands in the world. And if you're in the top 2 or 3, you're still really bloody brilliant. And I think at this point in my life, Suede were probably number 1 or number 2, in my heart, at least. There were other bands, but I didn't love them the way that I love Suede, because I was growing up as Suede were growing up. I was changing as Suede were changing. And the idea that inside Dog Man Star, there's that element of the album, is that it just says, no, I don't need to follow your standard song conventions. I don't need to write lyrics around boy meets girl under a sun that explodes for no apparent reason on a silvery moon. This album was writing about weird and unusual subject matters in a way that wasn't dealt with in the pop lexicon. And also this album came out, and it was very much the antithesis of everything that was going on in the world of Britpop at the time. So Britpop was just starting to explode, probably started around about April 1994. I would be confident in saying that Britpop was born the day that Kurt Cobain died. And so, for example, Blur's Parklife was huge. Pulp's His and Hers was really bubbling under. Oasis had just hit the scene and were exploding everywhere. There was an element of core blimey, Gavin a cheeky chappy about Blur and some of the other bands that were coming up. There was Britpop was kind of like a literal, almost parody of what it was to be British. And make no mistake about it, I fucking hated Britpop. And I'm going to explain why in another video. But Suede were nothing to do with Britpop. Anybody that tells you that Suede were anything to do with Britpop is lying to you, okay? The first time that the words Brit and Pop were used together were in Select magazine in around about March 1993, when Select photoshopped a Union Jack in the background behind a picture of Brett. Didn't want to be associated with it, and I don't think it's fair at all to think of Suede as a Britpop band. They were Britpop adjacent, they were happening at the same times, they were playing the same venues, they were on the same touring circuits, but it's kind of like saying that just because something was happening at the same time is that you were automatically there. Now listen, Suede might have been in the room, but they weren't the murderers. They were just accessories to murder, if that makes sense. Accessories to Britpop. They were not Britpop. They were much better than Britpop. They were emotionally intelligent, these songs. These were bold songs. These weren't just, cool, blimey, governor, gonna go and do a little bit of a soundtrack to a nightclub and chatting up a girl. Give me gin and tonic, core, feeling supersonic. You know, that was like stupid. Stupid music. And I appear to have gone into a rant about why I don't like Britpop at all, but I think I'm going to have to do that when I start talking about seeing Oasis in 1996. Suede were much better than that, in the way that Pulp were much better. And if anyone says, well, who was better, Blur or Oasis? The answer, by the way, is either Suede or Pulp, okay? And let that be the end of the discussion. Now, following on from the first time that I saw the band at Brighton, they released The Wild Ones as a single. And The Wild Ones, the 12-inch, comes with the exclusive embossed photo insert, which is here, which is a picture of four people in black and white, looking quite moody, not quite sure what the future held for them. And again, a number 12, which I'm going to slip this back inside the sleeve here. And this version, by the way, of Dog Man Star, which I banded about earlier and drew no attention to whatsoever, it's the HMV and FOB exclusive olive green coloured vinyl reissue, which was released in 2018. This version here, by the way, is the Amazon exclusive coloured vinyl version of the album from the same year. This one is a slightly different shade of green. So there, coloured vinyl, kids, it's the thing. And with Wild Ones, they wrote their most direct, their most obvious, their most sincere, most gorgeous love song. People have gotten married to that song, and they should do, because it is a goddamn classic. And if it had been recorded by U2, everyone would be saying it's the best song ever, and it would appear on all the talent shows everywhere, and people would be slaughtering it on the X Factor. But because Suede wrote it, and Suede aren't cool, this amazing song has been overlooked by history unjustly and unfairly. And I always think that Suede have been overlooked by history as one of the bands that time has forgotten, when all the other bands from the same period of time, Suede excluded, Oasis, Blur, fucking Menswear, all those bands have got success and have been, you know, culturally reappraised as good, where Suede have been overlooked because people thought that Suede were too British in some respects, because they talked about things like shopping estates, paracetamol, they talked about council houses, they talked about chemsex, they talked about the things that people didn't want to talk about. They talked about the grim and dirty side of life, and how the fact that without, you can't know love if you don't know hate, you can't know joy if you don't know despair, you know, you can't have day without night. And Suede embraced both of those, as opposed to just sitting around sneering, telling you that they were going to go and take the white line and everything was going to feel fine, and they're going to have a bit of gin and tonic, and they're going to go and feel supersonic, and they're going to go and have a champagne super duper up your ass. You know, this was a band that was much more emotionally intelligent than certainly the early Oasis albums. And The Wild Ones is an incredible song, and it should be pretty much the national anthem of the UK. This is the second CD single, by the way, that's got a remix by Brian Eno. It's also got the first non-Bernard song in the Suede canon, which is Asda Town, which was written by not by Bernard, written by Brett on his own. Sorry about that. With Richard's first recorded appearance in the band. It's a great song actually, but much unknown, and it should be better known. If I'm really honest about it, it should be better known. Now, a lot of people were kind of thinking that Suede were washed up, they were over, that you know, they'd finished when Bernard left, and you know, underestimate the band at your peril, because the next thing that comes out is New Generation. Now, this is the song that's got about 20 gazillion choruses. It is always rips the roof off a venue when the band perform it live. And here's the 12-inch single, which has, by the way, on the B-side, because it's a double A, it has a song called Together, which is the first single written and the first song written by the band with Richard Oakes. And Together is, again, an unsung classic of the band. It is very good indeed. I'm trying not to use hyperbole here. It's very good indeed, and they're only just getting started. Now, if, for example, a band's debut single was Together, most people would go, oh my God, that's a band to watch. They've got promise. Something good's going to happen there. If your first single is Together, together as just the B-side or the double A side on this. And I'd like to point out the band were already written off. So it didn't matter how good Suede were at this point. It didn't matter how good the shows were. None of it mattered because Bernard had left. So everyone was going, well, they're just a ghost band going around touring other man's songs and so on and so forth. And it really lit a fire under them. And I think it really underestimated the importance of the other members of the group. Here is a lovely CD single which has some B-sides recorded in Stockholm, which is a great city, by the way, at the Circus Stockholm, not a venue I've been to around there. But it was included, I think, probably to say to people, this guy can really play the fucking guitar. Underestimate him at your peril. But I'd already seen the band. I'd seen them with Richard. I'd seen them with Bernard. They're two very, very different experiences. They're both very, very good. Here is a bootleg called Old Man's Car, recorded at Milan on the 13th of November 1994. And there, you know, the releases from that particular period kind of grind to a halt. The band were planning on releasing a single of The Power with, I think, Have You Ever Been This Low and Elaine Page on the B-side. Have You Ever Been This Low and a re-recording of Elaine Page, which was then called Another No One, became B-sides of the first single from the next album. And I think it was a wise move to do that, because releasing a fourth single right in the midst of Britpop, right while you know, Pulp had conquered the universe with Common People, whilst Blur had just come to the end of the Parklife period, while Oasis had just released Some Might Say, I think it would have been perhaps not quite the right move. It would have kept the band stuck a little bit in the past, and they needed to move on from that. Now, they were still touring. I saw them at the Leicester's Montfort Hall on the 31st of January 1995, and that was the day before Richie from the Manic Street Preachers went missing, and Richie and the Manics had toured with Suede on the European leg of the Dog Man Star tour. It was a really good show. I don't remember very much about it now, but it was 26 years ago, so you can forgive me around that. And the band went to Europe, they went to America, they went back to the UK. They played, I think, 3 shows in the UK. In May, they played Blackpool, and they played the London Royal Albert Hall, which is the site of this particular T-shirt here, was purchased at the Albert Hall. And the show that they played at the Blackpool Empress Ballroom was an incredible show, because the band almost had been untethered from commercial expectations. They'd been untethered from people's, you know, aspirations around them. They were just playing shows, and they were playing to within inches of their lives. And you know, some bands, they really hit a peak on stage, and you really know that band has gelled completely. They're starting to go. You know, it's a really exciting thing to see a band when they're playing amazing shows. Now, I've seen Depeche Mode loads and loads of times, but a Depeche Mode show in Stockholm is 99% identical to a Depeche Mode show in Sheffield, or a Depeche Mode show in Sacramento, or Saigon, if they ever play Saigon, for example. A Suede show is different every time. It's the same, but it's different every time. And at this point, you know, the Asphalt World, for example, was an incredible experience to see live, performed on that tour by a band that was young. It had been written off. It was hungry. It was desperate. It wanted to prove a point to you. And the only way it could prove the point to you that Suede was still fucking brilliant was by playing amazing shows. And that's exactly what they did. And Blackpool was a very, very strange night for me, for a personal reason, is that firstly, we drove up to Blackpool. We saw Suede. We got drunk. And then we drove back from Blackpool. And I was very drunk. And coming back from Blackpool, I was dropped off at the foot of my road in Birmingham. You know, I live with my mum and my dad and my brother. And it was probably about 2:30 in the morning, and I was just starting to get the headache, which you get when you're not invincible and you drink. I was walking up, and I was like, oh, God, I just want to go to bed. I'm tired. Have a glass of water, maybe read a bit, watch a bit of television, go to bed, maybe have a fucking long sleep, and everything was going to be great. And you know, I could see there was an ambulance that was driving up the road, and it was, you know, had a torch, and they were looking at room numbers, and I kind of felt, that's weird. And I walked through the front door of the house, and the house, the situation is fucked. I can't be polite about it. You know, my mum is upstairs, and she's having a heart attack, and she's screaming at the top of her voice that she's dying. And there's people I've never met that are in the hallway. My doctor, some ambulance people. I've got a hangover. My dad's on the loo, and my brother is crying in a corner. And man, how do you deal with that? And by the way, I was only 21, just 21. I don't remember much about that night. I remember I drank a lot of water to sober up pretty damn quickly. I remember I was the guy that went in and held her hand while she was screaming that she was dying. And I remember that I got in the ambulance with her, and I stayed up all night. And this was before I had a mobile phone, by the way, and I didn't have a huge amount of money, so I had to use the payphone at the hospital the next day to ring my girlfriend and tell her what had happened. And I rang home first, And as far as I remember, I was the only family member who was in the hospital, and I was sat there whilst I heard it happening, whilst I heard her recovering from this, whilst I heard her being treated. A female heart attack is very different from a male heart attack, by the way, and it's good. It's good advice to go and look up the symptoms around it so that you know what you're dealing with when it happens. But I was there in the hospital. I was there in the ambulance. I was there in the room, and I was shit-faced, and it was so horrible. I would never want anybody to go through this. But then that's part of love, part of families, isn't it? Is that going into this that you're going to have a moment when your heart is going to be broken by something like that. And I stayed up all night. And God, I wanted to go to sleep, but you can't go to sleep on those hospital chairs. You just can't do it. It's impossible. And so probably about 8 o'clock in the morning, the doctors, I think they told me that she'd stabilised and that everything was okay. And at that point, I had been up for 25 hours without the aid of any pharmaceuticals, nothing stronger than a can of full-fat Coke and adrenaline. And they told me that it was okay. She was going to stabilise. She was going to live. I rang home. I rang Joe. And then I came home. And I have no memory of the rest of the day. And that was how I saw the last show of the Dog Man Star tour. Probably unique, I would have thought. I don't think anybody else would have experienced that. And I think probably that's the best place to end it, really. I should talk about the reissues of the Dog Man Star album. But it doesn't feel appropriate to do that right now. I think I've reached the end of what I want to talk about right now. I'm going to stop. I'm going to pick up when I do an episode about coming up the Dog Man Star reissues in 2011 and the coming up reissues. And I think that's probably the place where I'm going to end it right now. So, sorry this went to a place that you probably weren't expecting. Probably not a place that I was expecting to go to, actually. But this is the thing, is I start talking, and then all of a sudden my mouth goes off over to a place, and I'm like, oh, I'm committed now, I'm going to have to follow this one through. So Suede were, and always will be a really important band in my life for a number of reasons. They brought me love, they brought me happiness, they brought me joy, they brought me great sadness. They brought me the whole gamut of human emotions and the experiences which have happened in my life related to that band. And like anything which is worthwhile, is that I don't regret any of it at all. If I'd have just gone out on the town in Birmingham that night, my day would have been very, very different. But it wouldn't have been the same. And I don't think it's fair to think that you want to go back and change history or change, well, woulda, coulda, shoulda done this, that, and the other. You only get one path through life. You only get one shot, as Eminem said, to do this. And, every time I hear Dog Man Star, I think about that night, because I can't not think about that night. It's a formative experience, in the same way that, you know where you were when a major world event happened. You know where you were when 9/11 happened. You know where you were when anything in world history or your personal history happened, or the moment when you realised that a relationship had come to an end. That's as a it's mentioned in Inside Out, which was on television earlier on today. It's a core memory. It sticks with you forever. You know, if I get dementia and start to forget things, that's going to be one of the last things I ever forget. So I'm going to stop here. I don't know what the next episode is going to be about, and I don't know when it's going to happen. Certainly not tonight. I know that. Doing 2 episodes in one day, like I did yesterday, by the way. Pretty brave. Borderline stupid, depending on your point of view. Thin line between bravery and stupidity, and normally it's whichever side of the wall you're sat on, because one side's safe and the other side is a cliff edge. I'm going to stop here. If you've got any comments, any questions, any suggestions, anything you'd like me to talk about in future episodes, please do put something in the comments page around that. Hopefully this has been okay for you, and I will hopefully see you again soon in another episode where I talk about things that are perhaps less traumatic. Anyway, thank you very much for your time, and I will talk to you again at some point. Bye.